But now, my friends, it's time to talk about one of my favorite handhelds of all time, because in 2002, the Game Boy Advance was definitely hot. A lot of people loved it. Like, I bought the Game Boy Advance when it first came out with like one of the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater games. I got the wide blue Game Boy Advance, and comparing the releases for Game Boy Advance in contrast to the GameCube, which I know is a weird example, but I was a big Game Boy gamer around this point, not so much on the Nintendo GameCube. In your case, Ryan, when you think about the GBA around this time, was that something you were invested in?
Only a little bit. So the funny story with Game Boy Advance for me is my sister got a Game Boy Advance. She got the white model, which I believe was the only other available model at the time besides the like purplish blue one. Was that like indigo? I don't remember. It was kind of like the GameCube color a little bit. And the game that was actually that she got with it was Crash Bandicoot, which did come out in this year.
And that was pretty good. The Game Boy Advance had a really how do they say it, like downscale version of games, like downgraded versions of games, but that legit worked.
On this list here was number 32. It's called Crash Bandicoot The Huge Adventure. So it was it was like a side-scrolling Crash Bandicoot. I remember thinking, I was like, whoa, it's kind of weird to be playing Crash Bandicoot on a Nintendo console because I so associated it with Sony and PlayStation.
Yep.
But it was a fun game. I don't think I've ever beaten a Crash Bandicoot game. This game got really difficult towards the end, so I don't remember. I remember getting decently far. That was the thing with
Crash. I mean, when people compare Spyro to Crash, Spyro was a lot more like the streamlined way. Crash was like pull your hair difficult sometimes. So yeah. And for context, like we are using once again Metacritic, their top 100 highest rated games. So this is not us ranking this. This is us reacting to some of the games on this list. And I'm not going to bring up the WWE game for this, but there was one. But one of my favorite Game Boy Advance games came out this year, and I remember in 2002, not now. And I remember I got it for like $15 because nobody was buying it, and it's Fire Pro Wrestling 2. I think I legit played over 100 hours of this game. It is ridiculous. I mean, if you don't like Fire Pro, then you're not going to like it. It's one of those things that you like it or you hate it. But if you love those games, the one on the Game Boy Advance is pretty damn awesome. I don't know if you have any experiences with those.
I played a little bit of some of the Fire Pro Wrestling games, not specifically this GBA one, but it's one of those ones where it's harder for me to get into. I feel like for me, wrestling games, it's similar to Grand Theft Auto, where 3D versus 2D is just two different worlds. I know it's like a kind of an isometric view or whatever, but to me, it's like 3D it's where it's at. If it's not, it's harder for me to be like immersed in it.
Now, one of these games that I got to bring up, and I have been dying for some kind of like a remake or remaster of this, Mega Man Battle Network. In this case, we got Mega Man Battle Network 2, came out July 2002, got a Metascore of 81. These games like blew my mind because Mega Man, it's like you get the traditional side-scrolling ones, but then you have Mega Man Legends. Like they have done a lot. Like I think after Mario, people think of Sonic as like this character that's done a lot, but man, like Mega Man's pretty badass. And there's a lot of games to this day that have actually borrowed the combat elements. It's like a grid-based combat. It's got the top-down, like slightly angled view. These games were awesome, and they made a lot of these, but they kind of ended on the DS, I think they did.
Okay, yeah, I do remember you talking about that previously, and I've not quite ever really gotten into those grid battle type games, and it's something I really should dive more into.
I think you'd be a big fan of it now.
Yeah, and I think even like the South Park game started doing that in the second one, right? So something I really should try more.
So there's that. Now, something that I'm bringing up here just out of curiosity, I've always had this problem with them porting fighting games. Like I remember playing Street Fighter 2 on the Game Boy, and it's like it kind of looks like Street Fighter, but don't like.
Yeah.
Whoever wanted like the Game Boy version of like Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter? It's like seriously, who wanted that? Did you want that, Ryan?
No, No, you always knew you were going to get like the lesser version, right? But sometimes you had to settle, right?
Exactly. But this is the most ridiculous thing. So you would think it's like, oh, Street Fighter's like a 2D game. I mean, like, what are they going to do? They did a really good version of Tekken on the Game Boy Advance. It was one of those rentals, like, because I don't know about you, but I could rent Game Boy Advance games here.
Yeah, I do remember that.
I rented it. I rented it as like, oh, this is going to be so bad, but I got to experience it. And then I started playing it. I'm like, how is this so accurate? Like, is it amazing? No. But it looks like Tekken. It feels like Tekken. And I was just like, what the hell? This has no right to be this good. I mean, even with the little gameplay that you're seeing for the video versions, like, what's your initial take on this?
Yeah, it actually looks surprisingly fluid and like a real fighting game. And I know Game Boy Advanced, it had a little bit more buttons, right? You had the shoulder buttons as well. So it kind of made combinations and things a little bit more interesting than you could have done on the original Game Boy and the Game Boy Color. So it might have been kind of that extra step needed, along with obviously the more advanced technology, to make like an actually good fighting game on handheld.
And look, rating-wise, it got an 82. And I mean, this one I never played, but Mortal Kombat Deadly
Not what
Alliance,
you would expect from like a Game Boy Advance version of a Tekken game.
What would I expect? What would I want to see?
Well, I said not what you would have expected. Right? Yeah.
No, exactly. I love that Metacritic. I'm like, damn, this looks good. For the the Game Boy Advance version of Deadly Alliance, Mortal Kombat, they just have the console gameplay. I'm just like, this is not the gameplay I was looking for. I'm just saying now. But then moving on, I got to bring this up again. Weirdly enough, another fighting game. I legit played this version of the game, and it had no right to be this good. Got a Metascore of 83, which is Street Fighter Alpha 3. And for context, like, Street Fighter Alpha 3 is one of my favorite fighting games ever. Like, on the PS1, I love Alpha 2, Alpha 3, and I remember I had played the Tekken Advance, and once I saw this in the shelves, I'm like, I mean, what the hell? If they poured a Tekken, they got to make this one look good. And man, it was very authentic.
Could you battle over the link cable thing?
I believe it did. I never had enough. I never had a friend with any game on. Like, I stopped doing link cable stuff by Game Boy Color. By Game Boy Advance, a lot of my friends that were gamers just kind of dropped off. So I'm like, oh man.
It was so tough to do any game like outside of Pokemon, right? Because it's like nobody had it's like they had to have the same game as you. One of you had to have the link cable, and everyone obviously had Pokemon for a lot of these handhelds, but other games it was much harder to find someone who had the same game, because a lot of times it's like, oh, you just borrow each other's games and stuff like that.
Exactly. Now, bringing this one up, I haven't played it, but I feel it would be insulting if we did not bring it up. For context, like, Super Smash Brothers was, I believe, my first viewing of Kirby. Like, I really had never played a Super Nintendo Kirby game. It wasn't up until I played as Kirby on Super Smash. I'm like, oh, okay, so now I get what those are. I'd always seen the box art, but then at number 19, this one got a Metascore of 81. It's Kirby Nightmare in Dreamland. Had you played this one?
I have not. The one I really played the most was Kirby Superstar. But yeah, there was a lot of Game Boy Advanced titles I missed. But I do enjoy, playing Kirby. But again, a series I don't think I've ever beaten a single game. So, but
I don't know why. It's just like, it's always there. I'll play like the first 2 levels of a Kirby game, and then I'll be good.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way a lot of times.
Now, this one here, I don't know if did you ever play any Duke Nukem game? Any of them?
Played some Duke Nukem Forever, that's for sure. And
wait. Yeah. Why is that the first one? Like, seriously?
Because I had to play it after all the hype and everything.
Those are all the wrong reasons, though, right?
But I remember not specifically playing it, but going to a friend's house and him showing me Duke Nukem. And I was like probably too young to be seeing the contents of that game. But yeah, that I remember the PC
pixelated
versions.
boobies.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, the Game Boy Advance version did not have the pixelated boobies, but we did get a Game Boy Advance version of this, and it's kind of ridiculous because
this feels like it shouldn't have as good of a score as it does at 81 again.
And this is why I wanted to bring it up. So in 2002, we got two really well-known games. We got Duke Nukem Advance, which is a port of Duke Nukem 3D. It's like there's a lot of alternations, right? But then we also got Doom 2, and the surprising thing is it as good as the PC versions? No. But let's not forget that we were not used to the idea of a 3D style, right? It's like 3D style because it's not actually 3D, but the illusion of 3D in handheld is ridiculous. So I got this. I remember playing a little bit of Doom 2, and this is like when I really became curious about game development, because it's like, what did it take to get this in here, right? Like, I've played the larger version. How do you get that into like a smaller thing?
Yeah, I'd love to hear that story. Yeah.
Exactly. It's really, really good stuff. And then, see here, we got a couple more games. Now, in a different light, you had said that you skipped Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4 in our previous podcast episode, but I'm just going to say it. Some of my favorite Tony Hawk's Pro Skater games are on the Game Boy Advance. Like, when I got the first game, I think it was Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. I think that was the one that came out on the GBA.
Yeah, that was the first one.
Exactly.
Too. Yeah.
I got that with the expectation of like, man, it's all right. I'm going to enjoy it. I think I played that more than actual Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. And then I ended up buying like almost all of these. Like, I didn't get Thug. Wow. It's kind of the opposite. Like, for Thug, I did fully switch to console. But the score here, top 10, came out in October 2002, 85. Are you missing out on the soundtrack, which is a big part of Tony Hawk? Absolutely. But the fact that it got an 85, with the exception of a soundtrack, I mean, that says a lot, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think they found a formula that worked for handheld. It wasn't going to be the exact same experience, but they made something that was playable and fun.
I was going to show some gameplay for the video version. They just got the PS2 gameplay. I mean, you can imagine that being the Game Boy Advance and be like, damn, dude, they went up there. But no, wishful thinking.
It's tough to find. I can't blame them. It's tough to find Game Boy Advance trailers for especially games that had versions on other systems.
That's true. You know what I really would love for us to do eventually is to provide a little bit more handheld coverage like for the Game Boy Advance, because you brought up like Spyro. I mean, I brought up Spyro, you brought up Crash. It's like there's all of these like large IPs that got legit good games on the Game Boy Advance, but it's like I thought about that. Like, oh, that Spyro game's got to suck because it's on the Game Boy Advance. And then I played it via emulation recently. It's like, dude, this is like a legit, this is not a port. This is its own unique, good game that feels better than it should.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some hidden gems there that maybe people overlook, especially now when you could just play, okay, like in the case of Spyro, it's like we have the Reignited trilogy. Why would you go back to a Game Boy Advance one? Well, maybe there's something to that one.
Exactly. Now, this may catch me some flack. I actually bought this game, and I returned it the day after because I had bought it used. At number 7, with a metascore of 87, Castlevania Harmony of Dissonance. It's worth noting, I had never played a Castlevania game. I was living in Wisconsin for a couple of months here. I go to Funko Land. That was actually the store around that time. And I'm just like, I got me a GBA, want to play an action game, and the dude tells me, oh, you're going to love, there's like this really big PS1 game. It's got a Game Boy Advance type of thing. I buy it. I go back to the hotel. I played for a couple of minutes, and it just did not click for me. We have played for a review recently, Super Castlevania 4, and I really enjoyed that. And I always kept thinking, like, man, maybe I just wasn't in the right mindset with this game. Did you play any of these?
No. I know the Game Boy Advance series really started to follow in the footsteps of like Symphony of the Night, though, which is a game I have played. and I've heard a lot of great things. I've had friends who've played. I don't think it was this specific one, but maybe one of the other.
There's like 2 or 3
releases.
GBA,
I think I think there's around maybe 3 if I remember correctly. But I know that these are very well liked games, and again, like I said, they follow that like the Metroidvania style, right? Where it's not like the original ones where you kind of just play through a level, but it's a lot more similar to Metroid.
Man, this is a powerful list now. Now I'm just going to list out the top 6. This is where you really see a dramatic shift in just like brand awareness, because like a lot of these games are still relevant. So number 6 is a Tactics Ogre, The Knight of Lotus. One of my biggest regrets for not owning this, because Final Fantasy Tactics is one of my favorite games of all time. This one got a Metascore of 88. Now we talked about Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4. 3 actually also came out that year, March, with a score of 90. Then this is like, I hated these damn names so bad.
Yeah.
Number 4, Yoshi's Island, Super Mario Advance 3, with a score of 91. Holy crap, this game's relevant now. Number 3, Metroid Fusion, with a score of 92. Number 2, Super Mario World, Super Mario Advance 2. I hate these names so bad.
Yep.
And then number 1, I think you played this game, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, with a score of 95.
Never heard of it. Yeah.
World got a 92. Have you ever played any of those Legend of Zelda games?
Just a few of them. Just a few. So
what do you think about that list?
Yeah, so this is where I think the identity of the Game Boy Advance kind of rests, and a little bit unfair to it, because even myself, I think of this a lot of times, is when I think of the Game Boy Advance, I think of, okay, this is a console that basically re-released a lot of Super Nintendo games, and it was great. A lot of Super Nintendo games were now playable handheld, because not too long ago that seemed like an impossibility.
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of the identity that really stuck with the Game Boy Advance, because not only that, I mean, it started with its launch. Super Mario Advance was Super Mario Brothers 2, the US version. And then they kind of continued that series of, okay, the next one is Mario World, then we have Yoshi's Island, things like that. Yeah, we got Link to the Past. And then many, many more. Eventually, they did all the Donkey Kong Country games on Game Boy Advance. So I think its reputation is like, okay, this is the game that just is like a handheld version of Super Nintendo.
Because they did like Metroid, the classic series.
They did Zelda. Yeah, there's the classic series for Zelda. So yeah, this system got so many ports. But as we went through, I think a lot of the stuff we covered early on really is where the rest of the identity of the Game Boy Advance lies, and that it did have, it could walk and talk on its own, right? It had games that were exclusive to it that are worth playing and made this system more than just like a port machine.
And I think part of the branding, and you can see with like Metroid Fusion and Castlevania here, it's like, okay, so in the PS2, GameCube, Xbox generation, a lot of companies just switched to 3D games. So on the GameCube, you got Metroid Prime, right? But then the Game Boy Advance is like, oh, are you still like a 2D gamer? Well, we can still make that happen. So you kind of got the best of both worlds, because in the same year, I mean, that was a powerful year for Metroid fans, because you get, it's like, if you want 2D, you get that. If you want the other thing, you get that too. The
2000s was a good time for Metroid fans.
Yeah.
I feel bad for
I understand their pain decades. Now, because it's like, wow, that was a shift, a dramatic shift.
Absolutely.
But then just quickly reacting, I would like to know, especially with like the Super Nintendo ports, in your case being a huge, you have a channel that's essentially mainly Zelda based. One of the biggest criticisms for the Game Boy Advance was not its visual quality, but its sound. It was very distorted. So a lot of these ports, I feel like this is when gamers could really feel like there's something that doesn't feel quite like the original one. And especially with like Mario and Zelda having such memorable music. Same thing happened with Final Fantasy. Breath of Fire 2. I was going to say Breath of the Wild. But, hey, can you imagine a GBA version?
Yeah.
Yeah, you could get that. But what did you think of that, not evolution, because it's technically a downgrade, right? But that alternate version of games based on the Super Nintendo ones?
Yeah, so A Link to the Past is the one obviously I have the most experience with playing the Super Nintendo and the Game Boy Advance. There's honestly not too much of a downgrade. It's a little bit weird because they input Link's like Ocarina of Time voice in the GBA version when he slashes the sword and stuff. Like it's like Child Link or something.
Okay.
That or they used another Link's voice or something. I think it was Ocarina of Time though. It seems a little weird. It just doesn't like fit with like the Super Nintendo kind of feel or whatever. But other than that, yeah, the sound is a little bit weird. I know what you mean with kind of like the muffled GBA.
A lot of highs,
music.
not a lot of bass.
Yeah, exactly. That it is. It's a little rough. But other than that, I think it's a perfectly serviceable like port of the game, and it even included its own game Four Swords, which was multiplayer only, but in a pretty short experience, but was kind of their like dipping their toe in the water of trying to do some multiplayer Zelda, which I'm personally not a fan of, but it is a game that stands not necessarily on its own, but started kind of a series. And yeah, because I know the sound of the GBA, this obviously didn't come out in 2002, the year we're talking about, but games like Donkey Kong Country 3, the GBA version actually has its own soundtrack because the Super Nintendo version was like very bassy, and it just would have sounded really bad on the GBA version. And there's people who first played the GBA version and they stick by the soundtrack in that game. And like David Wise, who does all the Donkey Kong music, this is a tangent, I'm sorry, but I have to say it.
Hey, work on it.
So David Wise, I guess he did all the original DKC2 music, and it's fantastic. And he wasn't as involved with 3, so he did the music for GBA version. But I'm sorry, it was not his best work. The Super Nintendo soundtrack is way better, and anyone who thinks the GBA soundtrack's better is just wrong. I'm sorry. They're just wrong. Straight
up. Your opinion is wrong.
Yeah.
Is what Ryan
And
said.
they actually added a whole new world in the GBA Donkey Kong 3.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
But I haven't played it, but it doesn't seem like it's like that crazy good. But anyway. But that's for later. We'll get into that more in other years.
No, but it's worth pointing out because even though those DKC games didn't come out this year, it's still like the whole Super Nintendo in handheld mode. And I mean, especially when you introduce the Game Boy Advance SP with the backlit screens, like you could see these games in such great quality, which is just like mind blowing, right? Because I think everybody in hindsight remembers like the backlight as a default thing. It's like, no.
Oh yeah. No, I still vividly remember having to go under like a lamp at night to play GBA, not just Game Boy. You had to do it for GBA as well.
And the DS, the launch DS didn't have a backlight.
Oh, it did not have a backlight?
Yeah.
Which is weird because they had the SP, you would think. Yeah.
It's called Nintendo.
I'm glad I came in at DS Lite is all I'm
everybody
saying.
loves the DS Lite. And then when talking about 2002, I really do think that it is an excellent year for the Game Boy Advance, like considering the fact that if you love the Super Nintendo, you want some of that on the go, you got a lot of good stuff. You get a sequel to one of the more favorite games on Super Nintendo with Metroid Fusion. You get spin-off series like Castlevania. You get your Sonic games, like there's other stuff I didn't even cover here. You got a lot of decent baseball games. Baseball Advance came out here, and that was really good. Lunar Legend. The Game Boy Advance was a beast for role-playing games. I think it was this before or after we got games like Golden Sun. But when talking about 2002, I would love to get everybody's feedback. What did you think about this? If you were to just give your overall impressions just based on this list of games that we talked about, Ryan, like how would you rate, or what's your reaction with this selection?
I think it's a very solid lineup. We have a game like Metroid Fusion, which is a part of Nintendo's like premier, IPs, and that's like a game for specifically the Game Boy Advance, and then you mix in all the Super Nintendo ports as well to really have it be a great year. And then again, you have some of like the downgraded, not even necessarily downgraded, but the Game Boy Advance version of popular series like Tony Hawk. And then, another series like Castlevania. So it is, that top 20, top 15 games. Like you said, if you're a fan of Super Nintendo and games in that style, this was a really fantastic year to play some of those games maybe you missed at the time, while also having some top series like Metroid and Tony Hawk also have some great games to play. And like you said, if you enjoy RPGs, there's a lot here too.
Absolutely. And I think eventually, maybe next year, we will cover some Game Boy Advance games for the sake of full length reviews. And hypothetically, if anybody would like us to eventually talk about one of those games or the GBA in more detail, drop a comment on YouTube, youtube.com/acastofthepast. Drop some recommendations.
Yeah, there is a hidden gem GBA game that most people don't expect or wouldn't expect. It kind of flies under the radar. Let us know.
Yeah,
maybe we can do it for a review.
Yeah, there's a lot of those. And if you enjoyed this, I really enjoyed the back-to-back conversation. It's our first time doing this, which is, we did essentially a whole year of most consoles that were relevant around that time, starting with PS2, Xbox, GameCube, Game Boy Advance. So if you like all this stuff, the best way you can support on podcast apps is by dropping that 5-star review on Apple Podcast, Stitcher. We post clips at twitter.com/acastofthepast and on my Instagram, which is instagram.com/MrPlayerJuan. I post some Instagram stories, so that's another way that you can get everything out there. And yeah, on YouTube, subscribe as well and drop that bell. And the last thing is, it is part of what? What are we part of, Ryan? It's all part of what?
It's all about the conversations.
Yeah. And where is that conversation taking place, Ryan?
That is over at acastofthepast.com/Discord, where you can join that conversation that we love to talk about. But there's plenty of topics, video games, food. We all have our own personal channels where I cover a lot of Zelda content. Juan covers a lot of Wii U, PS3 generation stuff. All of our updates are there, as well as Mr. Brickhouse Hamilton and his Lego builds.
Hamilton.
And plenty of other conversations over there. We got someone in the Discord who just opened a video game shop. That's super
awesome.
exciting. And he's kind of walking us through that experience, and that's been a ton of fun to support him in his journey.
Yeah, I just want to give a shout out to, it is on Instagram. It is the.experience.share, I believe it is. I am making sure. Exactly. It is the.experience.share. Shout out to Sir Meatwad, Glorious, Marvelous Games, all those awesome names. But he opened up a pretty awesome retro game store in California. So if you want to visit an awesome retro game store, you can do so over there. Yeah, and he loves Sega Saturn and all that stuff. And anybody that's out there that loves to do retro collecting or anything like that, just give us a shout out or just join the Discord. He's somebody that he just started as a listener, checking out some of my videos, some of the podcasts, and he's become a friend. And hopefully we can get him in the podcast one day and just share those experiences, because it's opening up your own retro game store. Yeah. I mean, just what? It's just insane. So,
yeah, and from what I've seen in the pictures, I wish I could visit it, but it looks awesome. And that's a really cool story, and it's really fun to talk about that with him. So yeah, plenty of those fun conversations going on at the Discord. So really encourage more people to join, because it's a growing family.
Absolutely. So up until next time, that was a lovely, lovely closing to another episode of A Cast
to the
Past. And I'll eventually get a Saturn, because I know you're listening someday, but not now. Too damn expensive. Have you seen those prices? Hell no.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for checking out the video. If you liked it, please consider subscribing, and we are also available on podcast feeds. So search the name, click on the Sword and Stone, and enjoy a brand new episode every single Sunday.